What do you think? Should we match our shots? Like,
should we match our shots?
And, like, should mine be a little closer so that, you know, my head's
Oh,
about
wow.
the same? What do you think? Should we care?
Spoken like a true director.
Well, you know, okay, so if we do that, let's compromise. I just moved a little closer. Can you move your phone a little farther?
I can move back, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, or you can move back, either way.
You know what's funny? When I made Rendezvous in Chicago, I did reverse shot editing for the first time ever.
Yes.
And because I hate it. Like, I don't like seeing it in movies. I think it just looks like television. So what I did in order to try and make it interesting was I took a tape measure and I measured the distance from the lens of the camera to the nose of the actor. And I made sure it was identical.
Yeah.
Because I thought, for both actors, because I thought when the audience sees it, it will look more intentional rather than just, you know, sloppy cutting back and forth.
Sure. I think you have to decide. It bothers me when I watch a film and you can tell they did these like over the shoulder shots, but the framing is different.
Yes.
It's either sloppy or it's intended to mean something about the power relationship.
Right.
Kind of thing. But it can't just be an oversight that, well, you know, I forgot where the camera was, or
Right.
So yeah, all right. I think we're about the same now. That's good. Hey, thanks for doing this today. Oh, your hand is huge in the foreground. That's kind of
my
cool.
head is.
Well, yeah, when you reached forward, your hand looming into the foreground. So, I've got my coffee too. It's that time of day.
Excellent. Cheers
to you. Cheers to us. So, you know, why don't you just say who you are and what you're up to?
Okay, great. For those who do not know, I am Michael Glover Smith. I'm a Chicago-based filmmaker and also a film studies instructor at multiple colleges in the Chicago area. And it is my great pleasure to interview today the filmmaker Martina Reese. Martina, who are you?
I'm Martina Reese, and I am currently in pre-production for my first feature film called Exile. And it's a huge step up for me from the short films that I've been working on and off, really for the past decade of my life, since discovering in about 2010 how much I loved filmmaking. So I want to start by saying thank you to you, Michael, because when I think of all the things that have powered me along my way, I think about two things that have to do with you in particular. One is, before I ever met you, I went to Facets when you were screening your first film, Mercury, Cool Apocalypse. And there I was in this little black theater. You were introduced by Milos Stelik, saying that makes me miss him and how supportive he is of early career filmmakers, giving them a place to be seen and heard. Anyway, so I saw your first film. I saw you. I didn't meet you, but I later saw you on a Redline platform and thought, he looks familiar. But then even more critically, after a screening of, I think it was my films, Slow Me Down and Big Break, you were present at a screening of those at Chicago Filmmakers. You friended me on Facebook and you said something probably offhand, like, you should make your first feature film. And I can't tell you how empowering it was to hear that from you, who at that point I think had maybe 2 or probably 3 feature films under your belt. But, you know, maybe you didn't realize how much that meant to me, but I kind of just stored that away as some kind of information from somebody who had gone ahead and done so much more than I had, that, you know, I should give it a shot too. And so here I am giving it a shot.
Yeah, well, you know, when I was making shorts myself, there were feature filmmakers who were encouraging to me as well. So I figure, you know, I just got to pay it forward.
Yeah.
But let's talk first about the difference between making shorts and making features. I think that's a good place to start because, as you said, you've made numerous short films over the years. many of which are wonderful. I'm a huge fan of Slow Me Down in particular. Um, and, you know, I think every filmmaker starts off making shorts, almost every filmmaker, you know, and at some point they feel like they're ready to take that leap. So I just want to ask how you're feeling right now. Are you excited? Are you nervous? You know, this is clearly the biggest challenge you've ever faced as a filmmaker. So tell me a little bit about why you felt like you were ready now to make your first feature, and how it's different than the shorts that you've made in the past.
Yeah, right. I like your co-star there. All right, there's so much wrapped up in that question. So let me tease that apart. When I made shorts, they were sort of low risk because I was spending zero to very little money. I was doing much of the labor myself and then hitting people up for free favors. So if they turned out great, good. If they didn't, not much had been lost in the process. In the meantime, just in the act of doing it, I was improving my skills, getting a better sense of how to find my voice, watching other people's films more carefully, and then applying that knowledge to what I was doing. So yes, many, 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 many shorts later, I have realized that shorts don't have too much of a place to go. I mean, it's partly just a result of the way the marketplace or the distribution channels go. But having made all these shorts, it's sort of like, well, where do they go? Where do they live? How do people see them? And there's just not much of a platform for shorts. And now, for that reason, because I would like for my work to find an audience, and feature films and TV are more easily channeled toward an audience. That's one reason. But even more, I think that since creating a film experience is about creating an all-absorbing universe for the viewer to inhabit for a period of time, I think that a short is almost too short a period of time for someone to become fully immersed and absorbed in the world that you're creating. And I think the reason that feature films exist in that 70-minute to almost 2-hour zone is because there's something about the human attention span that can be absorbed into an out-of-body experience for that length of time. And that's kind of a sweet spot. So I want to be in that sweet spot. So I want to go from shorts to making a feature film. And when I first realized that, I feel like I'm ready for this, it's time to make that next step. I didn't realize at that point how big the step was going to be. I thought, I'll shoot a few scenes myself. I'll have a cinematographer come in and do some really difficult ones so I can focus on directing, and and then when I realized I need a producer. I can't do all that myself, and I'm going to cast some actors, and I have to respect their work by paying them for it. And so it all turned out to be so much more complex and expensive than I anticipated. And so I'm just trying to expand to meet the reality of what I'm confronting as I plan this thing.
It's so funny that everything you said just really took me back to when I made my first feature. And I think about how naive I was and how that is actually a virtue.
Yeah, right.
Because if you knew how hard it was before you started, if you knew how complicated and how expensive it was, you probably wouldn't do it.
It's but like the frog in the hot water thing,
Yes.
As long as the water's slowly getting hotter, you kind of sit it out, but anyone in their right mind would jump out immediately. Yeah, right. I'm the frog, the water's getting hotter, I'm just going to stick it out.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about the movie specifically. I think the subject of the film, which is immigration in America, is obviously a hot button topic right now, as recent events in the media have made very clear. What was it about this subject that appealed to you, and what do you think that you personally can bring to this topic that maybe other filmmakers could not?
Sure. Well, the danger of making any film about an existence that is not your own is to find an authentic way to tell that story. And I am not an undocumented Polish immigrant, nor am I a man in my 40s. So there is a hazard, I realize, in taking on a project like this. So I have to go back to what inspired me to make the story in the first place, which was personal encounters with people whose lives have a lot in common with the characters in this film. And as a white American born in this country who speaks without an accent, I have lived in my universe, and it was eye-opening and revelatory for me to gradually get to know some people whose condition is so different than my own, to the point that they could open up and tell me things that were actually personal and confidential. And I've been privileged to get a glimpse into that world that's so different than my own by building that bond of trust. Now, because it is a bond of trust, I think I also have to respect the privacy of the people who have entrusted me with their life stories. But I do feel that everything I've done in the film is based on trying to be extremely sensitive to the stories as told to me, and then also other kinds of research. You can hear a lot of stories on NPR about where people are speaking in the first person about their own immigrant stories. Another thing I'll say about it is that when you say that this is a movie about immigration, it's definitely true. It's also important to me for this not to be a generalized polemic about a social problem. I'm not interested in being that kind of filmmaker, in pushing an agenda. I'm certainly not interested in encouraging a bunch of viewers to look at these poor, pitiful people on screen and somehow feel ennobled because they have tolerated the suffering of watching other people in such difficult life circumstances. This virtue signaling kind of thing, I think, has a counterpart in film, maybe even documentary film more than narrative film, where it's possible to create a world where the viewer almost pities the characters. Not interested in doing that. These characters are not pitiful, they're not pitiable, nor are they model immigrants. I'm wanting to create a universe of very specific characters who are flawed, interesting, funny, distinct from each other. So yeah, that's the thing.
So it's about real people.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And since all the people who are playing the roles are not very far from the characters they're playing, that's also been kind of a check for me. I've gotten some feedback about particular conversational things where somebody will say, I don't know, that just kind of doesn't ring true. They wouldn't say that. Or I can ask my friends who are Polish immigrants, so what happens when Polish people get together and speak in Polish at a cafe table? What would they talk about? And then kind of get insights from the answers I get to those questions about how to develop scenes that sort of reflect a world that I myself have never been in and never will be. So I'm hoping that the film succeeds on the level of communicating something that feels kind of authentic instead of projected.
I know exactly what you mean. As a straight white man who has, directed actors who are not straight or white or men, I always check in with those actors and say, if anything does not ring true to you, let me know. We'll change it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, kind of the most effective kind of research that you can do as a filmmaker is check in with the people that you're working with, especially the ones who are in front of the camera, and ask them for their input.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, if we were all going to be super cautious, we would write stories that are about people who are very much like us. And I don't know, that just seems kind of limiting because the world we inhabit is so rich and so diverse. So, how can we just be sensitive, attuned, do our homework, and create a world that's populated with diverse characters, and do that in a way that is, faithful and like credible.
Yep, absolutely. So you say, that you're not a Polish immigrant, that this is a film about this guy, Chris, but then the other lead character is an American woman, Abigail, who is a film director, and you are a film director.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm not going to ask you if this film is autobiographical, because I hate getting asked that question myself.
Yeah.
But first of all, because I know the answer is always no, it's not, but I do want to ask how personal this film is for you. And especially in terms of your depiction of gender roles, there's been a lot of discussion in the media about female representation in cinema in recent years. So because you are a female writer director, was it important for you to create a female lead that would, be somehow different than what we typically see in films that are directed by men? And the gender roles and this, especially when it comes to this sort of cross-cultural relationship between a man and a woman, in terms of how you depict that relationship from a female perspective. Was that important for you?
Yeah, well, it's an excellent question. And I would say, of course, yes. I'm interested in using my condition as a female to somehow illuminate how some women relate and operate in the world in a way that maybe some male filmmakers don't spend as much time developing. I certainly think there are many male filmmakers who do an excellent job representing women on screen. So I'm not trying to make any kind of generalization saying women do it better or only women can do it. However, I am intrigued at certain things about the way filmmakers create their film worlds. And one thing I've noticed is that when you have a male character and a female character and they're in the same age range, it's sort of like you have to resolve this issue of, is there going to be a romance or is there not going to be a romance? And so you either have to set up your story world so that this is a possibility and they deal with it, or this is excluded from the world of possibility, either because, one of them is heterosexual and the other is not, or one of them is in a committed relationship and not available, whatever. So in this particular case, I wanted to create a world in which romance was not on the table. It's not the subject of this film. And so then the curious thing is, given that there is this almost expectation that people have to sort out whether there's going to be a romantic component to the story or not, I thought, well, interestingly enough, the typical setup is for people who are about the same age, or an older man and a younger woman. So here's a case where the woman is somewhat older than the man. And that in itself, I think, becomes an interesting thing. So like how big would the difference in their ages have to be so that most viewers would think that it would probably not click romantically? That in itself, that question raises some interesting things about the way gender roles and age factors into our societal expectations about romantic chemistry. So, that's kind of interesting. But getting back to your question about I, as a female director, writing a story about where the second most dominant character is a female, I would love to get to a time when that question is asked of male writers and directors.
Absolutely.
So I think that we're at a point in time when a non-white writer director will be asked, how does race and ethnicity factor into your work? I would love it if white directors who make movies without any people of color in it were asked, so how does race figure into your work? Because obviously it does by omission or exclusion. And likewise, I would say that wouldn't it be great if we started, mulling over with male writers and directors So you've developed a story with no major female characters in it, or a group of men in an action flick with one woman. So how does gender factor into the worlds you compose? It tends to not be a question that is posed. So, you know, as someone who's outside that particular mainstream, I can expect that question will come my way. But I welcome the day when that question is asked more universally.
Excellent answer. I welcome that day. I welcome that day as well.
Yeah, bring it on.
So let's talk a little bit about the casting process. The actors who are going to appear in these roles, are they professionals? Are they non-professionals? And what specific qualities were you looking for when it came to casting these roles and finding people who would bring these characters to life?
Yeah. Well, before I started casting for Exile, I had done casting by, you know, hitting up people who were often non-actors where, hey, you want to be in my movie? Like the woman behind the counter at the library, I'm checking out another pile of DVDs. And she says, you like movies? And I say, yeah, I'm passionate about filmmaking. She says, I've always wanted to be an actress. And I say, well, in fact, my film, The Librarians, happened that very way. I hit up the librarian who expressed an interest in being an actress and got her to commit to one and only one film. But so for Exile, I needed to have people who were able to memorize and people who understood some things about acting for continuity, which is a challenge for actors who don't have experience to do the same gesture the same time, so that when the same way every time, so that when a movie is edited together, it's kind of seamless in terms of the continuity. So I didn't have experience with casting, so I collaborated with an actress who had worked with me in my film First Date. That movie, I had the privilege of working with two super fine Chicago actors, Walt Sloan and Joette Waters. Joette Waters, because she herself has auditioned for so many films and also done some stage work, she helped me figure out how to find actors. So I put a posting on backstage.com for non-union actors and listed all the roles there, and I started getting a whole bunch of people who were interested in auditioning for those roles. I was also getting word of mouth recommendations from Joette, who's very well connected in the Chicago acting network. So Joette and I held a series of auditions at the Harold Washington Library, a couple at the Oak Park Public Library, and super fine candidates presented themselves. It was sometimes difficult to make a decision because many talented people presented themselves. So sometimes there were secondary considerations. Not only are you a super fine actress, but by casting you in this role, I can do a better job of reflecting the diversity of the country we live in, because that was important. So yeah, that's how the casting worked. I forget if there was another part to your question. Oh, right, and then COVID happened just as we were maybe 2/3 of the way through casting. So the last part of the casting happened by actors submitting self-tapes. And then, you know, here I would have 4 self-tapes for the same role, Joette and I can look at them and talk about the strengths of these actors and then make an offer by email. Do you remember that early stage of the pandemic when we all thought, yeah, you know, things will get back to normal by June, July?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I was in a hurry to finish the casting so that when this whole pandemic thing blew over, we could shoot
in a month.
July.
Yeah.
I look back on that now and I think, oh boy, that's so clueless. So the cast that we assembled then has been sort of in a state of suspension for a year. And then when things started to wake up and it looked like it might be possible for us to shoot in July of this year, I got back in touch with the cast, and all of them are on board except for 2 who have had to drop out because of, you know, like logistical problems. And so we are in the process of replacing those two actors. But, you know, thanks to Joette, I knew how to run an audition, how long each audition should be, how much of a side, you know, a script segment to give an actor to prepare, what to look for in the submissions that we got. And she has been really an essential part of bringing together this fine cast.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Did you see Scutley? Which
I did. Oh,
yes,
I
and
did.
that was directed by my Rendezvous producer, Lane Murray Williams.
Yes, that's a beautiful movie. And of course, we're not going to tell what is, there's a lot of special things about that movie, but Joette's role is just like,
Yeah,
blew my mind.
she's
Yes, so
fantastic.
Scuttly, find it, check it out.
Check it out. So let's talk about the cinematography. One thing I love about your shorts is I feel like they're always very visually strong and visually interesting,
Well,
which you know a lot of you know filmmakers don't start with the image. You know they make films that are more like film stage plays. But you're really interested in making cinematic films. So tell me who your DP is on this film and describe to me what the visual style is going to be like and how you are working with him in order to create that style.
Yeah, well, thanks for your praise about the cinematography. Up till now, it's all been me behind the camera. So I haven't had to communicate anything to another brain. It's all been like, you know, try it. And I use storyboards and I plan, I choose locations carefully. And that's always been a pleasure for me because I think cinema is ultimately a visual medium. If you're not going to make it a rich visual experience, choose another medium, you know, like do a radio play, dude. You know, so that's it's very, very important, I think, to create this immersive mood and tone in the visual realm. Now for this one, since I'm not the cinematographer, and boy, won't it be nice just to focus on directing, I'm working with Victor Tan, who you know, I had the pleasure of meeting him 2 times in person before the pandemic blindsided us. He is a graduate of DePaul's cinematography program, and since graduating 5 or so years ago, he's been very busy doing shorts, documentaries, and corporate work. So he's been improving his chops all along. One of the interesting things about the production team is that it's the first feature film for all of us. I would like to think that all of us have a lot of experience and we're not neophytes, but there's something special about all of us opening that door together at the same time. So the producer, the production sound mixer, me, Victor, it's our first feature film. So I started breaking down the scenes by doing storyboards, which is my usual thing, and then trying to translate those into shot lists. And this was a degree of structured organization that I've never had to do before, but essential, you know, just to get through an ambitious day's shoot. A lot of prior planning would be needed. I understood that. But when our producer, Corey Gilbert, came on board, Corey does a lot of corporate work and commercials. So he sent me over this thing he'd done. He called it an overhead, which was like a schematic diagram of a floor plan with all the furniture and walls and door openings in place. And then indications of where the actors would be and where the camera would be and what direction it would be pointed, and then a sort of description. So this was like a breakthrough for me because although I have watched so many films and tried to watch them very carefully, this sort of behind the scenes process information had been pretty opaque to me because I'm not, you know, working on other people's film productions and I'm not an industry insider. So just that little guide about how to create documentation that gives a very clear idea of what you would like to achieve with this shot within this scene. And then if you take all the shots together, you see what your coverage of that scene is, and you can imagine how to cut that together into a sequence. So I've been working on that, and thank goodness the pandemic came, so I had a year to be busy about that. If we'd shot this movie last summer, as I thought, I wouldn't even have figured out that there was this method for clearly taking the contents of my mind, and of course, having to clarify them and develop them in the process. They become concrete. And then being able to show those to the producer and the cinematographer, having them giving me feedback, like, I don't know, I think that's too long a period for the camera to not be on Chris's face. I think maybe you should have a, a gimbal shot that, that kind of thing. So the whole visual approach is going to be made very concrete before we begin, and it will also have been kind of vetted and analyzed by the people who can implement it. So we have this shared understanding of the best way to capture the action.
Very cool. What do you hope will happen to this film? In your best case scenario, in your dreams, how do you imagine people will be able to experience this film?
Yeah, well, as you must know, this is the challenge. If you're not a filmmaker with name recognition, the question is, how do you get your film to a place where people can see it? And then beyond that, like dream on, how would you actually end up making some money off of it so you could recoup what you spent and get some money to make your next film? This is such a big challenge for people who are operating on my level, and maybe even at yours. The whole distribution thing is very challenging. So I have tried to do a lot of advanced homework so I can kind of anticipate what's going to happen with that. My current thinking is that there are two ways to go. One is the route of film festivals, and the other is the route of trying to find distribution channels. Those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. You can do the festival circuit, and then having played out the festival circuit, then you can seek out some sort of streaming option. I may do the festival circuit. I am feeling a little burned out on the festival circuit. I think the secret of the film festival thing is that most film festivals that have any prestige attached to them, like all film festivals, they depend, among other income sources, from a lot of people submitting their films and paying the entry fee so that the film festival itself can stay afloat. So to the greater extent that a film festival succeeds in attracting a lot of people to pay money to submit their films for consideration, it means that any individual film that is in there for consideration has a smaller and smaller chance not only of being selected, but even being viewed carefully and considered carefully. Now, I would love to know what goes on behind the dark curtain when some group of people are making the decision about which films are selected for a festival and which aren't. And I'm sure it varies from festival to festival. But I don't think that a person without some sort of somebody who knows somebody, or somebody who gets a recommendation from somebody who knows somebody on the judge panel for a film festival. I think honestly, it's very difficult to get your film into a film festival, especially one that has some prestige attached to it. So I do not want to be deluded about how productive that path might be for Exile. And the other thing is that if you want to do the festival circuit, it takes about a year, really. It takes your film out of commission for other possible channels for about a year. You submit it, they sit on it for a while. In the best case scenario, your film is selected, and then 6 months later, the festival happens. And it's only after that, or several of those, if you're lucky, that you can start thinking, I don't know, should I upload my movie to Amazon Prime? And I'm not sure I want to spend a year that way. I need to think about that. And maybe you and I can talk over coffee about what's the strategic thing to do. Now, it's funny, isn't it? The word content is used broadly to describe everything ranging from a feature film like Exile to my nephew's YouTube videos of his two adorable boys rollerblading. Okay, so we're swimming in content, everybody's producing content, and in some ways you would say that all of that content is competing for eyeballs. And you know, that to me, I don't know what to say about that. It makes it very challenging, I think, to stand out in the thicket of other content. But fortunately, because of the way the world works, there are more and more channels that are rising up to meet that need for independent filmmakers to find a way to get their film into a place where other people can stream and view, perhaps pay for it, without having to go through an intermediary who charges such a steep price for it that, you know, I think the current payback from Amazon Prime is a penny a minute. So if you can get somebody to watch your film for a half hour, you get 30 cents out of it. Now you have to have a lot of people watching your movie for a long time and repeatedly in order to, you know, get anything back on Amazon Prime. And I know these formulas keep changing. I think that's the current formula. It used to be better. They get better.
I'm pretty sure it's less than a penny a minute.
Okay, all right. So bleak, right? But there are places like Film Hub that is available, and there's another one I think it's called Indie Rights, something like that. Two streaming platforms that I'm very interested in checking out, where you create an export file that meets their criteria in terms of resolution and quality, and then you upload it to them. And then there continues to be the burden on the filmmaker to market their film to drive viewers, but at least you've solved the problem of where will my film live in the streaming universe. So you found a place for it. And now I'm very intrigued at the idea of using self-marketing to drive an audience to it. And if you're able to do that to some extent, then it may get to be on the radar of a streaming service who might think, ah, yeah, we could use a film with a Polish story. So I don't know, we'll see. I think this is like the huge challenge. And fortunately, I'm not motivated solely by the idea that I'm going to make a big splash and get a fat paycheck. That's not my motivation. If it were, I would just stop now and, you know, give up. There's something so inherently fulfilling and challenging and rewarding about the process of developing a story and then bringing it to life in film that, you know, when I get beyond that, it's just bliss.
Right. I'm sure there are Polish American institutions that you've probably looked into collaborating with in terms of getting it made, as well as in terms of getting it seen.
Yeah, there's certainly Polish language film festivals in Chicago, in LA, in Poland, and we hope to find a platform there. As far as institutional support, you know, that's definitely something that we're going to check out. And when we do, it won't just be me. It'll be me and a bunch of Polish-speaking people who are sort of there to attest to the authenticity of the product. But right now, honestly, I feel like what we have is this mythical, yeah, we're going to make a film and it's going to be really good. So from my perspective, it's premature to try to establish too much of a connection with any Polish institutions. You know, maybe when we film this and we have a trailer, maybe that's a good time to go to the Polish consulate in Chicago and say, hey, you want to put your logo on it? We'd love to have a little cultural fund money to work on post or, you know, whatever. And who knows what the response to that might be. But I think we're just going to hold off on that a little until we have something real to show that starts to capture what I hope is going to be the beauty of this product, of this content.
Absolutely. So my last question, but not the least, the way you're talking about this film, it sounds tremendously exciting. It sounds like a very vital film, and it sounds like something I would, pay to see in a theater. Um, for anyone who's watching this interview who wants to contribute and help you get the film made, what can they do?
Thank you.
In terms of financial support, in terms of material support, in terms of social media, how can they help you get there?
Yeah, for people who are on Facebook, it's easy to get on board with Exile. We have a very active and newsy Facebook page. It's at Exile Movie 2020. The @ sign, Exile Movie 2020. 2020 is when we started, way back then. Anyway, so if you're on Facebook, please visit the page, like it, follow it, and we're posting a lot of behind the scenes pictures and actor interviews and that kind of thing. And then we are running a crowdfunding campaign, and we're 65% of our goal right now. I hope by the time people listen to this video, we're past that. That's ancient history. And so the crowdfunding is happening on GoFundMe. So if you go to GoFundMe and search for Exile Movie, our campaign is called Screenplay to Screen, Exile Screenplay to Screen. So please seek us out on GoFundMe. A donation in any amount will help us take off, and it'll also put you on a list of people who are sure to get more information about when the screenings happen. And then, get your name in the credits.
Which is the best perk of all.
Yeah, right.
All right, well, thank you so much for talking with me about the film. Best of luck to you, and I am so excited to see the final product, hopefully later this year or next year.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you so much for spending this time together.
Okay, bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.